Hi everyone, I'm Lynn Trong with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar hosted by the U.S. Department of Energy Solar Decathlon. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the housekeeping features. For audio, you have two options. You can either listen through your computer or telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the mic and speakers option in the audio pane. By doing so, we'll eliminate the possibility of feedback and echo. If you select the telephone option, you should already see a box that will display the telephone number. Panelists, we ask that you please mute your audio device while you're not presenting. If you have any technical difficulties with the webinar, you can contact the GoToWebinars help desk for assistance. If you would like to ask a question during the webinar today, please use the questions pane to type in your question. We are recording the webinar, and today's recording will be available on the group's I/O site. And now for today's presentation. Our webinar is Solar Decathlon 2019 Design Challenge, Into the Shark Tank, presenting to the jurors. Our speakers today are Rachel Romero, Project Leader and Energy Engineer at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and Design Challenge Manager. Holly Jameson-Carr, who is our Solar Decathlon Director, Chris Reinhardt, who is a past competitor and winner, and Steve Brown, a past juror. With that, I'd like to welcome Rachel to start today's presentation.
Thanks, Lynn, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a fantastic webinar for you here today. Holly Carr is going to kick it off, and then we'll go into the Shark Tank with Christopher Reinhardt, who will represent the student view. And then we'll continue on with the juror view from Steve Brown. And then I'll give you some competition information to conclude. And then any of us would be happy to take your questions at the end of today. So with that, I'd like to introduce Holly Carr, the Solar Decathlon Acting Director.
Hello, thanks, Rachel. Rachel always gives me the easiest job. You saw that my bullet point for this entire webinar is to help you get excited. And you probably don't need that much help at this point. There are only 9 days left until this competition. But you have already come so far. You should really be proud of yourselves. At this point, you have submitted your projects. And I can see Rachel is putting up some images here that should look familiar to some of you. We've received fabulous renderings, team images, and all kinds of great visuals from you, and we love what we see. We are really excited to see you in Colorado next week. I'll be traveling out mid next week to help the NREL folks get ready for you all, and we are just beyond excited. Look at these beautiful drawings. They're just fantastic, and we can't wait to hear from you all in person about your work, about your projects, which I'm sure you must be very proud of at this point. We are going to be quite a crowd at NREL. We have a sold-out event coming next weekend. Really, we are packed to the gills with students and faculty and thought leaders and industry professionals who are going to be celebrating your accomplishments next weekend. We also have one additional piece that I want to make sure you all are aware of and can participate in, and that is the Solar Decathlon Film Festival. This is our inaugural film festival where we've invited all of you to submit short films, no more than 8 minutes, preferably shorter actually, that detail your project. Tell us about your design, but also the story behind your design, how your team worked together, your client if you had one, and who might be inhabiting your project if it were to be built. So we hope that you'll take advantage of that opportunity and participate in the film festival. Those films are due on April 9th. So with that, I'm going to give one more shout out to Christopher and Steve and thank them very much for coming on this afternoon for the Shark Tank. And I will turn it back over to you, Rachel, to open up the pool.
Fantastic. Thank you, Holly. Great to hear from you as always. Okay, our next speaker is Christopher Reinhardt. He is a past student of the competition. He competed, his team was first place from Ball State in 2017, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about that. But Chris is currently the Director of Sustainability and Research at Kripe Architects and Engineers. This year he added Well AP to his resume, and he is very involved with the program. So with that, I will let him take you into the Shark Tank.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. I hope you're all seeing my screen now. I'm calling this talk for you all the Shark Tank dance, and in a moment we'll see why. But I would like to start by congratulating you all, just like Holly was earlier. Like, this is a huge accomplishment that you have already achieved, and now you're going to this next phase of it. And it would be very understandable if some of you are feeling some nervousness or trepidation about that. I just came out of a presentation myself, and I was nervous about that too. So let's see here. I am clicking, and I'm not getting to the next screen. So we'll find out what happened. Okay, there we go. So there's that picture again. I do work at Kripe. I also should mention in the presentation I just gave right before this was for my MArch, my Master of Architecture thesis. I'm currently on a almost 100% sabbatical from work in order to finish my thesis. So that's been wonderful, and Ball State is, I'm just really, I'm digging it. I'm loving it. Okay, with that, let's get into the Shark Tank. I'm calling this a Shark Tank dance because here's what I think about when I think about a Shark Tank. Is I think about really brutal things. Like, when I saw Jaws as a child in the 80s, I didn't get in a pool for a while, you know, like, sharks are scary. I believe that the ways that we frame the situations that we're going to go into have an enormous effect on the way that we behave in that situation. And so there's going to be, really, this is sort of a pep talk, you know? And my pep talk to you is that the way you frame this thing that you're about to go through will be the main determinant of how you experience it. You know, your frame on life is how you interpret the events that you're surrounded by. So instead of thinking about this as a Shark Tank, I understand where they're coming from that. Like, it makes sense, and we live in a world of critique, most of us, and so we're used to getting up and having people critique us. But I'm going to suggest that instead of the Shark Tank part, we focus on the dance part. And the reason why I think it's important to frame this is because I think it is going to affect your experience. So before we get into that, before we get into the big idea, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So first, we're going to talk about metaphors, because like I said, I think the metaphors you use for your life control the way you experience everything. Then we're going to talk about some specific strategies that you can use as you plan the final details on your posters and your presentations. And then we're going to get down into the weeds with some actual tactics, like things that you can do, you know. And so there's one idea in the metaphor component, one big idea. And then at the strategy level, I'm going to give you several suggestions for that. And then when we get down to the level of tactics, there's actually going to be a bunch of them. And with anything in this presentation, just like I would suggest you approach all presentations you hear, don't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. If I say something that, you know, doesn't sit right with you, that's cool, just ignore it. But I think at least within this handful of things I'm going to share, there's going to be some helpful things. So tactics are at the ground level. You know, strategies, if we're thinking about this again metaphorically, get higher. We're looking down from above at what we're doing. And then if we get to the level of metaphors, we're really that's like, you know, airplane view. Okay. So I already said it. I believe that your metaphor controls everything. Your metaphor for the way you approach life. And if we look at that in a number of ways, you could say life is a game, right? And when you think about that, that creates a certain sense of emotions. You could think about this event that's coming up as a game. That's a little bit different than a Shark Tank, right? Another kind of game, though, is actually not nearly as happy as the last game and also not a team sport. So if you're thinking of games, I wouldn't be thinking about this as a game of chess. I'd be thinking about it as more of a team sport. You could have a negative metaphor here. You could think about life or this presentation as a war. I would not suggest that as a healthy or positive metaphor because of everything that comes along with it. But you could also conceive of this as a play, a show that you're putting on for the jury and the audience. You could also, if you want to go a little bit further out, you could imagine this as a dream. Life could be imagined as a dream, or this contest could be imagined as a dream. The point of all of this is just to say that your metaphor controls everything. I suggest something like this. It's a dance, it's a party, because of the way that you will then approach it. So your metaphor controls everything, like I've said, but I think when it comes to this project, we can get even a little more specific. We can say that your concept or your narrative for your project, that actually should be the controlling force for everything that you're doing. The concept for your project is the most important thing that you have. It's what you're selling us. And you're selling it to us through your images and through your words and through your physical models, if you have them in your posters. Everything that you're doing should be selling that narrative. So if we look at the metaphor, or in this case, the narrative of a dance, you know, a dance is fun and a dance is interactive. I really like that component of it. And a dance is also entertaining, or a party is entertaining. And so I believe this is a much more positive metaphor. That's why I called the talk the Shark Tank dance, because on the Shark Tank side of it, if we focus on that, it's deadly. Something with big teeth is biting at you. It's very one-sided, unless you're another shark. But if you're a human in a Shark Tank, you know, there's only really one direction that's going to go. And also, and this is the biggest, is that it's fear-based. And if you're coming at this presentation from a position of fear, you are not going to give it the same emotional performance as if you're coming at it from the perspective of fun. And I would definitely choose fun over fear. So again, your metaphor controls everything. More specifically, your concept or your narrative for your project controls everything. And so pick a metaphor that works for you for this. You don't have to pick my metaphor. It doesn't have to be a dance. But I'm just suggesting, you know, flip the script. Pick something aside from Shark Tank with which you want to frame this experience that you're about to go through. Okay, these are not the droids you're looking for. The point of this slide is, one, to see if you're paying attention. I don't know if there were laughs or groans there. As a dad, sometimes I'm actually going more for a groan than a laugh. But anyway, whether you chuckled or whatever, I was trying to get your attention. And now I want to get a little bit meta. And for a moment, you are now looking at the behind-the-scenes PowerPoint of the PowerPoint I'm giving you, right? And we're going to walk through some things real quick. Title slide, actually very lackluster, not exemplary for what I just told you. But then right away, we go into heavy visuals and a big idea. And from there, we go into an introduction of, here's what I'm going to tell you, and here is the structure for what I'm about to do. That way, people aren't lost. They know, okay, we're going to start here and we're going to go there, and then we're going to end somewhere else. And then in words, and I said it out loud, and I showed you on the screen the words that I'd already said, which was your metaphor controls everything. I said that again and again and again and again. And all the while I was showing you images, large images that I hope were captivating. I repeated my theme one more time. I gave you some more evidence for why I was suggesting what I was suggesting. I repeated the theme again. I think it's debatable whether or not I should have done that. But then, this is the point, I then told you what to do. I said, pick a metaphor that works for you. Now, by the time I got to that purple slide, I have a feeling that you really didn't feel like I was twisting your arm because of the way I got you there. I gave you all these options and I showed you everything, but then I told you what to do. I didn't phrase it as a question. I phrased it as a command, but I'm guessing it felt pretty soft. And that's kind of what this slide was intended to say, is that when you deliver your thesis, your concept, whatever the main idea is, by the time you lead us to that, you really want it to feel like you're saying, these are not the droids you're looking for. Whatever you tell us, we should just believe it, okay? Here's the slide we're on right now to get even more meta, and then here is where we're going. Okay, so now with that, let's get into the Shark Tank dance and talk about really dancing with the jury, because that's what this is about. And Steve, the presenter after me, who was actually in fact my juror when I competed, which I think is very amusing. And you know, Steve, if Steve disagrees with me about what I'm suggesting, I hope he says so, because that would be really a fun conversation. I liked dancing with Steve during that talk. So we talked about metaphor. That's where we just came from. Now we're going to talk about these strategies. There's 5 of them, okay? The first strategy I would suggest is to know your weaknesses. You probably already know them because you've run your project through a number of different gauntlets, your professors, your outside reviewers, your industry partners, your friends, your family, all these people. So you've looked at the project, your other team members have looked at the project, have other teams maybe look at the project, have professors look at it, whoever you can get to look at the project and point out the weaknesses, because now's your opportunity to shore up any weaknesses that you have. You know, these are images from the report that we submitted early on, and there were some things in there that we knew that we needed to address, and so we shored them up by the time we got to the end. So when this is a picture of me and my team and another team that competed, and our professor Tom Collins, as we were walking up to NREL. By the time you get to this point, by the time you're walking up to NREL, you know, it's game time. We didn't know they were taking our picture. By the way, they will be taking your picture probably. Number 2, I would say, is make very diligent progress, i.e. be doing something every single day. There are any number of things you can be doing day to day, lots of dress rehearsals. And again, you should be seeking critique and not praise. And so if you don't know what to do, you should ask a colleague, classmate, a professor, what's something I can work on right now? Here's a great little, you know, this idea again about not seeking praise but criticism from a book called It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be, one of my favorite books. It's awesome. Check it out. Number 3, as a strategy, you really want to lead the dance. You don't want to follow. By the time when you get to the Q&A part with the jurors, you want to make sure it doesn't spin out of control and become obvious that you don't know that you've lost control. You know, and so I think the way that you lead the dance is by having a really strong storyline to keep things focused, because if you're not focusing the jury on what you want them to think about, they're going to think about what they want to think about. And that's part of, like, that storyline will direct the attention of your audience. You want to gracefully respond to anything that's said to you in critique, and this is true of any critique, right? You want to gracefully respond and be open. You're not being defensive, but you also need to keep leading. And so as you're answering the questions that are thrown at you or the criticism that's coming your way, you got to roll with it, but you want to bring them back to what the big idea is. I can't tell you how to do that, but because it depends on what you've been given to work with, but it's really important to try to always bring it back to what your storyline is. What's your story? Here's a master of that, Ted Benson, he presented the year that I was out there as was one of the grand jurors, and he gave an amazing presentation with just one of the best storylines that had the whole, I think a number of tears were shed, plenty of laughs, all that stuff. Ted Benson, he's great. I don't know if he's there this year. If he is, you're in for a treat. If not, you should look him up. Number 4. I think it's really important as a strategy to try to create an emotional connection with the jury or with the audience in general. I believe that this is really why, you know, we won the year that I went, my partner and I, Luke Camp, won our category, the single family suburban, but we did not win the grand jury prize. There's a number of reasons for that. Number 1, I believe that the project that these folks on your screen presented was a better project, but also, even if the projects were equally good, Ryerson University and University of Toronto created a much more emotionally compelling story than Luke and I did. Luke and I had a story about a really great house. Ryerson University and University of Toronto had a story about how their scheme could transform urban landscapes and take what's essentially marginalized land and turn it into high-performance building, while at the same time increasing equity. I mean, it was amazing. That's why they won, I think. So some other just little tips, you know, because at this point you've got your story, right? So maybe you can beef up your story, but maybe not. No matter what your story is, things that will help you create an emotional connection are to, number 1, be yourself, you know, just get up there. And again, if you're coming from a perspective of having fun, that will be more easy to do than if you're feeling like super scared, right? If you are feeling scared or nervous, breathe and relax like ahead of time. And even when you're practicing, practice breathing before you start speaking, as just a way to train your body, you know, a little bit of muscle memory. And really focus on people. And I mean that in the sense that as you're telling your story, focus on the human components of the story, the community where your building is going to be, the occupants of your building, the industry partners you're working with. You know, any of that is what creates an emotional connection. A low EUI number or a low HERS score does not create an emotional connection, right? Everybody that's at the contest is going to have a good HERS score. So you're not going to win it with your HERS score. You're going to win it by making a great case and creating an emotionally compelling reason why your project stands out. And then also try your best, this is not easy to do, disconnect your emotions from the critique that you will receive from the jury. That will help you have more fun, and that will help you also be graceful. For instance, when Luke and I got up to talk about our project, we had reminded ourselves again and again and been practicing. We were not our project. You are not your project. When someone critiques your project, they're not critiquing you. This works best if when the project is being critiqued, if you're engaged in that, like we were standing there critiquing the project with the jury, you know, like, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody expects it to be perfect. So that was one way that we turned it into a dance, was we like danced with them. Research your jury a little bit, because all these juries are going to be a little different. The jurors all have their own background. They're going to come from different environments. And so if you know, for instance, that you have a jury member that is a code expert, or a jury member that is a home builder, most of you will likely have a jury member, I think, that's a home builder. I don't know for sure, but my guess is. So you can expect certain kinds of questions from those type of people. I would, going back to the thing before about shoring up your weaknesses, if you have a known weakness in an area where you have an expert judge, I would go find another expert that can maybe help you, you know, craft your statement about that thing that you know to be weak. Okay, those are some big ideas. Oh, hey, there's Steve. Hi, Steve. And there I am in the back, so you can tell that I'm not presenting here, but this is from that big group of slides from the year that I presented. The point of this is to say, look at this jury right here. You know, I'm not presenting them right now. I'm part of the audience, but you can tell that at least 3 out of the 5 members of the jury have smiles on their faces and they're engaged. 2 of them are, it's harder to read, but still, I would say that we even have like 3.5 smiles and maybe just a little bit of interest. Contrast that. What do we have here, you know? We've got the raised eyebrow. Steve's kind of like, nah, he's sitting back in his chair. He's not sure. You can tell that they are skeptical. Maybe this is because people have gotten defensive. Maybe it's because they didn't know what they were talking about. But the goal is that you want to keep things, if you can, on the fun side. If you're seeing things like this, yeah, like take a deep breath. Okay, there's our strategies. And now let's talk about some actual like boots on the ground tactics, which are some of them implementations of those strategies. But again, this is like a toolbox that I think any one of these tools on their own could be helpful. They don't have to be paired together. I think the #1 tactic is that every moment that you are there, you should enjoy the experience. This is an amazing thing that you're about to do. I had such a good time when I was out there. I made some new friends, people that have become friends to this day. I made some fantastic industry connections. I mean, that's what these things are about. So if this is your first event like this, like you are in for a treat, it might be, yeah, you will open your eyes to this whole world. These are some slides, you know, from some pictures from the year that I was there. Like, it is so much fun. You're going to have a great time. And if you're enjoying yourself throughout, that will help you when you're presenting to also enjoy yourself. Okay, I think the next one is to really be ready for the question and answer period. And I mean, like you have no idea what kind of questions they're going to ask you. That it would be too much to, I'm not asking you to divine the future, but I'm asking you to be ready for the fact that you are going to be asked questions. So there's two strategies, I think, here. One, and I've seen both in practice. I'm sure Steve has seen both in practice. I'd love to hear Steve's perspective on this, actually. I would say strategy A is have a point person. That point person sort of was either already serving as the project manager, or they're at least kind of serving as that role during the presentation. Or the point person could, that project manager idea is that there's one person that is the point person for the whole project. And if you've got a huge team, that might be a good way to organize. If you have a smaller team, or if you have very defined and limited scopes that each person worked on, maybe it's better to take a subject matter expert approach, where when a particular question is asked, you know that the person that handled that area is going to be the one to start answering it. The goal here is that you do not want a question asked by the jury and then everybody looks around at each other on the team with that sort of like, who's going to talk here? You know, that's a bad moment. That makes it look like you're unprepared. So whatever your strategy, which strategy you use is less important than when the question is asked, that you hit the ball. It's thrown and you hit it right back. I think that these two approaches of either having a project manager or a subject matter expert are good approaches for large groups, because the larger the group, the more difficult it is to know necessarily who's going to jump in and answer. And you also don't want everybody starting to talk at once. That would also appear disorganized. Another strategy is just to negate everything I just said and don't have a point person. But I would also add that this is not good for large groups. This worked really, really well for Luke and I. It was kind of a free-for-all approach, but Luke and I presented just as two people. We had some other team members that played supporting roles, but they did not come to the competition with us. So since it was just the two of us, and if you have a small team, that approach can work really well. It's organic, it's natural. It really helped Luke and I think, create a feeling of dancing with the jury. But it's not right for every situation. I think that this is much better for small groups, like I said. Number two, this is like a bunch of gibberish, and it kind of includes, I actually, as I was looking at this again, I left it in here because maybe it's helpful to see this, but like, you know, these are actually preference things for the most part, so I'm going to skip past this, but I think the most important two of them are number 4 and 5, and that is, don't be obtuse, you know, and I should have actually said, that's one of those things where the better way to say that would be, don't be unnecessarily difficult to understand or hard to understand. You know, communicate in, even though you can use jargon there. People are subject matter experts. There's no reason to make things needlessly complicated. And then number 5 is obviously just be consistent with everything that you do. Everything that you do. That's between your poster and your presentation and your report and all that stuff. That does tie right into number 3, which is when it comes to your presentation, if you don't already have a template, but I'm guessing that you do, you should make one. The template is the first order of business, and if you're already done without one, then you're already done without one. But next time around, make yourself a template, because you will thank yourself for that. The template should be coordinated with the report and the poster. And the reason having the template is good, because then if you decide to make a change, you don't have to literally change every slide. You're changing one thing, and that's you know, trickling through your whole presentation. And that template then becomes an organizational tool as well for your team and for the audience and the jury. So this was the template that Luke and I used, and I saw many other very similar templates. It wouldn't have to be done this way. This is just one way to do it. We had a heading at the top. It told our team name and it told what category or section we were talking about. And then along the bottom, we had a little bit of a timeline, and that timeline allowed us for the audience to know where we were at in the presentation. It also helped us to know where we were at in the presentation and to watch our own time so that we didn't run out of time. That's true in the in the long presentation, but we sort of bombed the long. I bombed the short presentation, which I'll tell you about briefly. So you can see there's also some builds in our slides, but then this was our poster, so you can see the connection there. The poster and the slideshow look the same. They use the same graphic language, the same colors, the same fonts, all that. This was our report. It's all tied together. I mean, you really are branding your project so that every interaction that the jury has with it is building the same kind of thing. When they come up and look at your poster and that casual interaction happens, that again is a touch with your project that is an opportunity. And if everything is coordinated, it helps them remember better projects from each other if your project has a distinct and recognizable identity, because you can imagine they have a number of projects. I think, what, 10, 8, 12, I don't know. They're looking at a lot of projects for each jury. Okay, number 4, how you organize your presentation can again be done any number of ways. I would just suggest, this goes along with that idea of consistency, that you use the challenge categories, or if in your project report you did not use the challenge categories, then you mirror what your project report is. You wouldn't have to do it this way, but it is probably the easiest way. I don't want to say it's foolproof, but it's close. You know, it's hard to go wrong with sticking with the same organizational structure, because again, imagine this. The jury has either literal or figurative score sheets, probably literal score sheets with these categories. I don't know if the categories are the same, but they're probably close. So if they have a question in a particular category and they need more information from your project about that, and yet you've used an entirely different method to structure your whole presentation, it's going to be more difficult for them to get the answer to the question. Whereas I actually literally had a juror, it was not Steve, but I had one of the jurors come up to me after the event in the hallway and say, the fact that you organized everything you did according to the categories was one of the reasons that it was so easy to see yours standing out as the best. Because apparently a lot of people didn't do that. And so, because then the jury's left like trying to dig through and find answers to stuff. Obviously it's too late when it comes to the report, but this is your opportunity to maybe clarify. Okay, another tactic. I like this one a lot because of the time lag that we have in the way that we're presenting. It might not come off as well today as it comes off live, because there's a lag, and I don't know if that lag is a half a second or 2.5 seconds, and so it's really hard for me to know when to push the button. But what you can see on the screen now probably is that on the left-hand side we had the plan that came from our industry partner, Lauren Wood Builders, and on the right-hand side we had our transformation of that plan. And I'm not going to talk through exactly what we did, but you'll start to see these builds bouncing back and forth from the left to the right, where areas are highlighted in one plan in one color, and then highlighted the same area in the other plan in a different color, and then the arrows are being used to show movement, or to show there's lines that are going to come up at some point for some plumbing things. Basically, this was a very easy way, without the slide advancing on the screen, to really make these floor plans come alive in a way. You know, here I'm talking about the work triangle in the kitchen and how we were able to create further advantages for that work triangle. So even getting into program elements, you know, talking about how we're transforming the space, any way that you can make your slideshow, the graphics of your slideshow reinforce the words that are coming out of your mouth as they're happening and create that dynamism, that's really going to help you out. And then I think the last move here was we showed, hey, the longest plumbing run was, you know, so long, and here we transformed it and we shaved 12 feet off of it or something. Okay, the next tactic is to show some process, not necessarily like sketches from, not your first napkin sketch, although maybe that's what that could be one way to do it. I'm talking here about like maybe your design process. What we decided to do was to show our design process. You're going to see a series of steps. We illustrated the design moves that we made and the corresponding shift to the HERS analysis as a result of those design moves. So this was a really easy way for us to both use this metric that was being used throughout the whole competition and that we're all familiar with, and then to show how we pushed that number down using our design process. And again, we aimed for consistency. We keyed the colors of the line to the actual colors with the eyedropper over on the left-hand side on the bar. All those little things, you know, they make a difference. Okay. Number 7, I think I've hinted at this before, and now we'll explicitly say it. Use your presentation and your poster to fill the known holes in your report. You know, we've talked about shoring up your weaknesses as a strategy. The tactic is this, that Luke and I looked through a report. We found the things that we knew we wanted to focus on. In some cases, it was some moisture analysis and some other things, and we made certain that those got layered into our poster and then into our slideshow. Or if you felt really good about everything, you don't think there's any holes, you can take it to the next level. Actually, that thing about moisture and dew point that I said for us was really a matter of taking it to the next level, because we had already addressed it as per the project requirements, but then we wanted to show that even after we submitted the report and everything else, we continued to work on the project to keep making these choices, and we did a WUFI analysis and some other things. And we showed that. So that was like a bonus. That was like the jurors had never seen that in anything else. And so we tried to not wow them, but just to impress them. Like, for us, this is a living thing. This is an ongoing conversation. The project is not dead. We didn't do it just to check a box. You know, we were engaged. Okay, a few more here on the tactics. The short presentation is all about the narrative. This is, if anything, I made a lot of mistakes here. Learn from my mistakes. Here's Luke and I presenting to the grand jury, and okay, here is the behind the scenes of our long presentation. It was 55 slides, and that was you know what, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, something like that. I don't know. Our short presentation was 40 flippin' slides. Like this is truly a WTF moment. I don't know what we were thinking there. The short presentation should have been like 10 slides or 20 slides maybe, but not 40, because literally the presentation ended with me realizing that I had 5 minutes of content to get through in 2 minutes, and so I had to say to the audience, okay, fasten your seatbelts, and then like try to be that Micro Machine dude from the commercials from way back when I was young. That's not good. I don't think that's, again, I think that Ryerson and Toronto literally had a better project than us, but even if our projects had equal merit, I think they still would have won because their presentation focused on the narrative. I would say, you know, what's the big picture of your project? That's the most important thing. You don't need to dig into, like we tried to show that descending graph with the HERS analysis during our short presentation. Skip all of that. I mean, that's my suggestion. Skip all of the, we've got a great HERS score. We know that already. Everybody's got a great HERS score. Just tell us the big picture. Focus on the outcomes of the project. If this thing happens, why is it going to be amazing? How is it going to change the world? Why is it deserve to stand out above the other projects? Because the numbers alone are not going to cut it. Again, everybody's got good numbers. You need to make people's hearts sing. If you can do that, and that's what Ryerson and Toronto did the year that I was there, you got it. Here they are. You know, they did it. They had such a good presentation. Even as they were showing their wall section, I have to say I had a lot of critique about their wall section, which I talked to them at the bar afterwards. But I totally was on board with their story. Like, they nailed it. It was amazing. Here's something that I just violated about an hour before I'm giving you this presentation. I just gave an MArch thesis presentation. I realized as I was concluding it, I hadn't really decided exactly where I was going to end. Oh, that's the worst. If you're going to memorize anything, memorize the conclusion. Know where you're going to end, because the absolute worst way to end a presentation is like this, going, okay, that's it, which I'm sure you've heard that and maybe even said it. I know I have. Or, you know, less bad than that, but also not ideal, is any questions. At least you're not trailing off. You know, you're not ending with an ellipsis mark. You're actually throwing the ball into the court of the jury. That is a fine way to do it. It's not the most elegant or powerful, but it works. And of course, the line, any questions, might come after another conclusion line. Here was our conclusion. We are delighted that the Forest Refuge Home will break ground this fall. And then I think we said thank you. And that was it, because again, this is about controlling the storyline and the narrative. You want to make sure that where everything falls and the last thing that is said is powerful, you know. And then again, we took that "these are not the droids you're looking for" thing. Instead of softly saying "any questions," you know, like with a questioning tone of voice, we issued it as a command. Now we'd like to hear from you. You know, like, again, lead the dance. lead the dance and try to do it gracefully. And this was the slide that we used to end. We wanted to focus people's attention on the fact that this thing was going to get built. That was our big idea. And so we did everything we could to conclude with reinforcing that big idea. Okay, have somebody else, another tactic here, and we're almost to the end of the tactics, have somebody else proofread your presentation, not just other people in your group, because I guarantee you're probably not going to catch everything. Just like this presentation that you're watching now, I have a bunch of thanks. Thank you, Lynn, for Lynn caught a couple of things when I sent her my slides. She noticed some word order issues and that I hadn't noticed because I'm too close to the presentation, and that I had misspelled something. And notice it even has a dang red line underneath it. Like PowerPoint is trying to tell me that it was misspelled, and I couldn't even catch that. So thank you, Lynn. And you should find somebody else to read your presentation. There's nothing worse than misspellings on slides. Okay, in summary, we talked about this big idea. We talked about controlling your own metaphor, and then also how that translates into your narrative and your concept driving everything about your project. We then talked about some big picture strategies, about ways that you can approach this, and things that you might want to consider. And then we looked at some actual on-the-ground tactics that you can use to make your presentation better. So I hope that these were helpful in some way or another. And I would just like to conclude by saying again that your metaphor controls everything. And if there's anything you take away from this presentation and that I can share, is that this isn't even just true just for this presentation, it's literally true for life. And yeah, I hope you have fun and enjoy playing with that idea. And with that, I am going to now pass the ball back to whoever's coming next. I'm sorry, I don't recall.
That's fine. Thank you, Chris. What an inspiring presentation. We appreciate your time, and all of that great information is fantastic for the students as they present. So with that, I'd like to introduce Steve Brown. He has been one of our jurors several times, and as a third-generation lumberman and builder with more than 40 years of experience, Steve has been around the construction business most of his life. He started building in the Dallas area in 1982, and in 1984, he changed the course of his construction business to build only extreme energy efficient homes using structural insulated panels as the primary building enclosure. He also helped pioneer many of the green techniques used today and has won many national housing awards over the years, most recently DOE Housing Innovation Awards. In addition to being nationally recognized as an authority on green buildings, extreme energy efficient homes, he also serves on the board of directors of the Green Extreme Homes Community Development Corporation and Plano Housing Corporation. So Steve is a very experienced juror and has worked on this program for several years. And I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Great, thanks, Rachel. And Chris, that was a great presentation. For all of you out there, in listening to Chris, you can tell why he won. He makes a great presentation. He talks. He doesn't try to tell you, but he talks to you, and that's important. So I decided that rather than have slides, a lot of slides, I just have one slide. So Rachel, if you'll roll it and go to the next one. And here it is. And I'm going to give you 15 minutes of pure gold. And here they are in 10 bullet parts. This is what the judges are looking for. This is what makes or breaks you as a team. And let me say something also about Chris and Luke when they made their presentation. We typically see 4, 5, or 6 people in a presentation. That's pretty normal. When 2 guys walk up in front of you, the first thought in your head is, as the judge is, this isn't going to be good. It was fantastic because they rolled off of each other. They didn't interrupt, but they had a great rapport between the 2 of them, and they talked to us as a judge. So first and foremost, relax. This isn't a Senate hearing. The judges can tell if you're nervous, and that's not good. You don't want us to know that. So just take your time. Have fun. That's what this thing is all about. Chris also made a point about having a point person. That's a real good idea. So think about those things and do that. Second of all, the judges, and I can tell you as a judge, I was just as excited as the students were to be there. It is a great honor. It is a privilege to come there. We work our lives in this industry, in the building industry, commercial or residential, and we strive to be the best at what we can do. To be selected to be a judge is a great honor, and to come up there and to work with students that we know in the future, this is what our building industry is. You are our future, and we'll talk about that later on. So know that we're just as excited to be there as you are, and we all will relax and have a good time. So now let's get into what you need to know. Tell your story. Don't read your story. Tell your story. Notes are for reference only. You need to work at this thing enough that you're fluid in what you speak and in the bullet points that you want to make and the points you want everybody to understand. Know your subject, and that's the thing, and be excited to talk about it. As a judge, I always look for the excitement in the person. If they were truly interested in what they were doing and truly excited, you can tell. It shows. So do that. Be sure to know about your subject and be ready at the end to answer questions about it, but know very well about your subject. Be able to explain what you wanted to accomplish and tell how you did it. Now, when you started this program, you had an idea of a house, a townhouse, a multifamily, or a commercial building. You knew what you wanted to do. You knew how you wanted to get there. Tell us about that. Those are the things, as a judge, that we want to hear. Use acronyms. That's fine. I can't tell you the number of acronyms that were thrown at me in all the different presentations. Some I knew, some I didn't. Remember this about your judges. I was a builder, so as a builder, I've got just enough knowledge about all the different trades and all the different aspects of what I do to make me dangerous. That's just how much I know. So I depend upon industry icons. I look for an HVAC contractor that's a whole lot more knowledgeable than I am. I look for an electrician that knows things that I don't know. I'm looking for those people. Now, he knows or she knows things in their industry that I don't know. So when you use an acronym, for instance, when I was growing up, a CD, the only CDs we knew were certificates of deposits at the bank. Then the next thing you know, they're called construction drawings. Then they're compact disc. So when you use an acronym, tell us what it is. Tell us what it stands for at least once. And then give the acronym for it after you've told us what it stands for. And then you can use the acronym all the time. Okay? That helps the judges out because a lot of times things are thrown at us. We don't understand it. And if we don't understand it, we're not going to give you as many points in your speech. Practice, practice, practice. And after you finish practicing, practice some more. Work in front of each other. This is something else Chris brought up, and this was something that we really noticed about his presentation. They had it down. They knew exactly what they were talking about, and you need to do the same thing. Talk to each other. Stand up in front of each other and do your parts. Do it in front of a mirror. Do it in front of people you don't know. It needs to be a conversation. It needs to be something as a judge that I can sit there. When you start talking to me, I immediately pick up on it and I understand what you're trying to tell me. Now, back on the first part when we talked about being nervous, because that's something that will affect you. I find that one of the best ways to calm yourself is before your presentation, and just right before, maybe 2 or 3 minutes before, whatever. Talk to the judges. Just strike up a conversation. Ask them where they're from. Ask them what business they're in. And that conversation eases the nervousness between you and the judge. So try that. That always works. Here's one that we really, really like. Tell us about your mistakes, the ones that you made, what went wrong, and how you fixed them. We all make mistakes. I make them every day. I have not built a single house, building, apartment complex that went right all the way through. I always had problems. That's the whole point of this industry. You've got to be able to solve problems on the fly. So Tell us the problems that you had with the presentation. Tell us when you drew the house, what went wrong with it. One of the greatest experiences I had in the industry. If you don't know who Joe Stebrick is, after this webinar, go look him up. He is a guru in building enclosures, and his company, Building Science Corporation, is one of the leaders, international leaders in the industry. One thing I really respect about Joe, and I respect a lot of things about him, but at one of his seminars in front of everybody, he gave a complete lecture on how he screwed up, how he made a mistake in a building, and what he had to do to go back and fix it. But he admitted the problem, he admitted the mistake, and the reasoning why he did it the way he did it, and what he had to do to go back and change it, and what he learned from it. And that's the thing, learn from your mistakes. So please, if something went terribly wrong, tell us about it. We want to hear, we want to know about these things. The other thing is, if you're here, if you're at this presentation, you're already a winner. So don't worry about winning. What you want to get across to the juror is, here is what I want to build. Here is how I want to build it. Here's how it's going to perform. And I want you to believe in it as much as I believe in it. So if you're there already, you're already a winner. Don't worry about winning. It will come naturally. That was another thing about Chris's presentation. To me, it was never about winning. I was so impressed with their presentation and how they made it to us, and how comfortable I felt in asking questions and how they answered questions. It was a rapport between two different people about the same industry, and getting the right answers for the questions that I had. He made me feel very comfortable, and so with that, he got high scores, and they won. Okay, so here's the last point that I want to tell you, and this is what the jurors understand. Our industry is, we need young people. We need them desperately in our industry, and we're looking to you as the future of our industry. Your ideas, your thoughts, what you put on paper, what you build. You are the future of our building industry, and as a judge, we know that. So we're there to help you. If you have questions before or after, talk to us. We're not going to give you any extra points for those things, but come talk to us. We'd like to know. And believe me, the jurors are just as interested in your projects as you've been. And with that, Rachel, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Steve. That was really great. And Steve is correct on everything he's listed here. So thank you. All right, now I get the less exciting part, but still very important. I'll give you a little bit of perspective of what's coming up and a few reminders, and then we'll answer some questions. Okay, so at this time, you have completed your project report. All that's left are project presentations and posters, and those are due next Tuesday, April 9th. Again, the deadline is 5 p.m. Eastern. Please note that Colorado and DOE in DC are on Eastern Daylight Time, so this is 5 p.m. EDT. So please make sure that you submit your project presentation, poster, and film. And note, presentations will not be accepted after this date, so make sure to get those in. And then here we are at Design Challenge Weekend at the NREL campus. Okay, file submission for these deliverables is again on the Dropbox. Same thing. Please make sure that you submit all files to the Dropbox and receive an individual email back for each of the files that you submit. We had several teams that potentially missed submission, and we want to make sure that you are getting all your submissions in through the Dropbox link. So presentations, both which we'll talk about here, and your poster go to this link. Please note that if more than one file is received for a particular type, the organizers will only accept the last received file before the deadline. So if you submit 2 division presentations, we will take the last one before the deadline. Okay, so each team does develop 2 presentations. The first is your division jury presentation, and this is given directly to your 4 jurors in person at the event, just like Chris was talking about. So what you will have is there will be a timer on the table. There will be a 25-minute presentation, an additional 10 minutes for Q&A, and then we do have built into the schedule a 5-minute buffer for transition and slides, and then a 5 or 15-minute break between the sessions. So you'll be able to see that on the schedule. You can go learn about people like Steve and your jurors. The juror bios are available on the Solar Decathlon website. So go check those out so you can figure out kind of who you're going to be talking to during Design Challenge weekend. Okay, the presentation venue, you can see in this picture kind of what it was like last year. It will be a conference room with a computer, a presentation computer on the podium, and a projector and screen at the front. Your jury, along with their jury coordinator, will be in the front row at these tables. And then there will be seating for approximately 40 to 50 people. The projectors are optimized for that 16:9 ratio, which we've requested that your slides be in, which we're presenting in right now. Some of the rooms will have handheld wireless mic and one lavalier mic. The commercial building rooms do not have a mic, so you'll just be speaking out loud to your jurors. We will provide a slide advancer with laser pointer in each of the rooms, and that will be connected to the presentation computer. And we will have a live webcast of the presentation slides and the speaking voices. Additional information will be coming out next week on how to access those webinars. Each team is allowed 1 spot in a practice room. So it is reserved for your team immediately prior to the team's presentation slot. So if you are the first presentation team on Saturday, please plan to practice beforehand, but they will open at 9 a.m. on Saturday and will be available to slot before your presentation. We hope that when you are not presenting or practicing, you will be attending the other presentations of other teams, whether it's in your division or other divisions. So as Chris and Steve has kind of told you about the Shark Tank, we recommend kind of the following steps. You can practice in your practice room if that's available. Make sure that you find your division presentation room. It would be good to check in during the break with your jury coordinator to make sure that you have that the slides are up. We recommend that you greet your jurors. They're very invested in you and want to get to know you, so greet them. If you have an exhibit, you can set that up and then get going with your presentation. Presentations will be led on time by your jury coordinator, so please don't be late. All right, and then your second presentation that you need to put together is your grand jury presentation. This is the first place winners of each division, and you will give it to 3 grand juries and all the attendees at the awards banquet on Sunday. This is 8 minutes in length, so this should be a different presentation than your division presentation. There will be no questions from the grand jury. And it's unique in that there are different evaluation parameters. So please review the guide further for that information. Also submitted next Tuesday, April 9th, is your project poster. This is optional, but very highly recommended, as the poster session is a fantastic event for students to participate in. So we recommend that the content should include the information that's in your project summary, which should be included in your project report. You're welcome to include any additional information, graphics, or images. And please print your poster and bring it to the competition. So note it is 3 feet wide by 2 feet tall. maximum size, and we will print, as you can see in this picture, a banner to go above with your university name on the top. Again, your poster PDF should be submitted by next Tuesday as well, but please also print it. Also optional for next Tuesday is, as Holly discussed earlier, the film festival. If you would like to, you can provide to the organizers a short film of up to 8 minutes in length. It doesn't have to be 8 minutes, it could be 2 minutes. And it will be screened at the inaugural Solar Decathlon Film Festival during Design Challenge weekend on Saturday evening at the Marriott. There will be some prizes and soda and popcorn, so we look forward to having that event and hopefully seeing your video. I would encourage you to go back to the Visiting NREL guide before you come. Everyone on your team should be registered at this time. There are requirements for foreign nationals, so please review the content of that and make sure you bring proper identification upon arrival. That document also includes maps on how to get to the NREL campus. So please refer to that. It can be found on the groups.io project site. A few reminders for on-site team members: all attendees must bring their ID to check into NREL. If you're a U.S. citizen, that means you're licensed most likely, but please review the Visiting NREL guide for additional information. And you will be required to visibly wear your event badge while on site. You can see this presenter is wearing his badge, so please make sure that you do that while on site so we can know that you're a visitor. Exhibits and scale models. This is optional. Teams do like to bring these if they want to show something during their presentation. Again, not required. It is in the agenda. If you want to bring that in early, we have a space for you to store it on Friday and Saturday. Teams are completely responsible for shipping and materials associated with that. So please review that guidance before bringing your scale model next week. As I said earlier, remote participation will be available via GoToMeeting and GoToWebinar, just like today's webinar. We will include all the collegiate division presentations. We will have Saturday lunch and Sunday morning, which includes the awards banquet, and there will be slides with audio. We recommend a phone line and a good internet connection to participate, and these links will be available next week via the groups.io project site. So with that, again, please share your excitement with us via #SolarDecathlonDesign. We've seen some great photos and Instagram and Facebook posts of our teams preparing and getting ready to come to Design Challenge weekend. Again, thank you to our sponsors, Ingersoll Rand and Solar Edge as our host sponsors, and our many education sponsors who helped to make this event possible. And with that, we do not have another webinar because we are looking forward to seeing you at Design Challenge weekend, and we'd be happy to take questions. Lynn?
Great, thanks so much. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Steve, for providing such great information. Just a reminder that if you haven't submitted a question and would like to, feel free to. Otherwise, after today's webinar, submit your questions to the emails that you see on the screen. So the first question is for Chris. Chris, can you provide just sort of a general time frame and an effort? How long did it take your team to put together the presentations and prepare and practice?
Yeah, what a great question. And I've thought about that and done some mental number crunching, even back then, sort of at the conclusion of the event. I thought, wow, how much time did we really spend on that? And I think that in the sort of 2 weeks leading up to when it comes to the report and all the stuff for the whole kind of the big project, it's impossible for me to know. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of hours, right? But in those last 2 weeks, working on the PowerPoint presentation and the poster, I bet, I had easily 40 to 50 hours a week probably on that. I mean, it was like my job. I was, well, okay, so maybe 30 to 40, because I also was doing other jobs, I realized, but it was a lot. I mean, it was many hours every day. And I know Luke probably had, half of that. So I bet together in 2 people in the last 2 weeks had 150 hours of time, maybe 120, somewhere in that range, 120 to 150. Not insignificant, right?
Not insignificant, that's for sure.
Wow. Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. So Steve, the next one is for you. Can you give examples of things that team members did before their presentation and possibly after that stood out to you and impressed you as a juror?
I noticed a lot of the teams sitting behind listening to the other presentations. So when we see people in there listening to their competition, it as a judge, I thought, they're trying to get a leg up on this other group. So listening to their competition is always good. You learn from their mistakes, or you learn from their positive points and things that you can do to better your own presentation. The ones that came up and spoke to me in the hallway, the ones that spoke to me while I was sitting there waiting for their presentation, being friendly, just wanting to talk, that's always very important. The judges want to know about you. We're excited that you're there. We're excited to see your presentation, but we'd like to know what got you into this business. What made you want to do this? We all know why we're in it, but we want to know why you're in it. So talk to the judges. That's something that's really important.
Great, thanks so much, Steve. So another question that relates to what you just said, because the jurors are posted on the website, for team members who do that research and look for them, say on Friday night, it's okay for them to approach their juror, strike up a conversation, or any advice that you have about that?
It never bothered me for somebody to come up and ask me for advice. I would not speak specifically about their presentation, but if they ask in general, sure. I mean, we're there. It's not such a strict competition that we're not there to help. So as a juror, if I could give you some points, what are you looking for, Judge? What do you like to see? Well, I like to see you make a good presentation. I like for you to know your subject. Not anything different than what I've told in those 10 points. Be able to speak to me, talk to me. I don't lecture to me, but tell me about your project and show your excitement about it. And tell me about yourself. That's what we found in talking with most of the students. They told us where they were from, what their degree plan was, what they planned on doing afterwards. I mean, we're always interested in that. What are you going to do with this knowledge that you have? Hopefully you'll continue on in the building business. So, yeah, we didn't have a problem talking with them prior to and especially after.
Great. And I would just add to that, students, please ask your jurors about their past and, what they've done to get where they are in their career. We have a lot of really esteemed jurors coming, just like Steve, who has done this in the past. So understand their career path and how they've made steps to, one, move this industry forward and be leaders in this industry. So I'd encourage you to ask them a lot about that too.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Rachel. Rachel, when will the Saturday presentation schedule be posted for the teams to see?
Great question, thank you. We hope to post that schedule early next week on the groups.io, so please look out for the team presentation schedule.
Great, thanks, Rachel. The next question is for Chris. Chris, what advice do you have for teams to adjust their long presentation to the shorter one? How hard was that for you all to do, and any additional advice is appreciated?
Yeah, I as I mentioned in the presentation, I bombed that, I think, horribly, because I think we took the wrong approach. We took the approach of taking the long presentation and attempting to hack it back to the short presentation. If I had to do it all over again, I would just start from scratch. I would say for the short 8-minute presentation, what's the big idea, and build everything about that. And then honestly, in practice, if I had to do it all over again, we practiced, like Steve was saying, Luke and I felt really comfortable with each other. That was a result of us practicing many, many, many times. But if I had to do it over again, I would, knowing what I know now, I would practice that 8-minute presentation. I think totally we practiced the 8-minute presentation twice, because everybody's perspective is like, oh, I might not have to give the 8-minute presentation. And that's a reasonable perspective. You might not have to. In fact, most of you won't, right? But I think if Luke and I had spent half of our practice time, because you can practice the 8-minute presentation 3 times in the time that you can practice the long presentation. If we practiced, we practiced the long presentation probably 10 times. If we had just spent more time practicing that 8-minute presentation, I think it would have even benefited our long presentation, because it never hurts to just keep reinforcing what's the big idea, what's the big idea. So I guess, yeah, summary, start from scratch, don't hack back the long one, and actually practice it as part of your dress rehearsals.
I think that's great advice, Chris. Teams should enter the weekend as if you're a winner. So come prepared to be that first place winner. So.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Rachel. How is the order of the presentations and the team slotting decided?
Great. So team slotting is done by random order. We actually use a computer program to randomly order those in your division, and then the organizers may do 1 or 2 swaps to ensure that a team is not presenting in 2 divisions at the same time. So if your collegiate institution has 2 or more teams, we try to put a space between to ensure that if a faculty advisor is on both, you can view that, or the team members can view all the presentations from your collegiate institution. So it's randomly assigned and will be published next week.
Great, thank you. That wraps up the question and answer session. So as I mentioned, if you have additional questions, please reach out via email to the ones that you see on the screen. I want to thank our speakers again and thank our participants. For our speakers, if you have any closing remarks, you're welcome to do them.
I would just say, everybody have a really great time. Thank you all for letting me share my stuff, and also it was really great to reconnect with Steve. Steve, great to hear from you, man. That was 15 minutes of gold.
Well, let me tell you, I went back in my files and pulled up your presentation, and it had nothing but plus marks on it. So good to talk to you again. Rachel, thank you so much, all of you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And teams, we look forward to seeing you soon. Good luck with your final presentations.
Thanks, everyone.